Hello and welcome. First video. Kinda nervous. If you don't like intros, you can skip ahead. I place the timestamps on the description box. I just thought I would introduce myself since, again, this is my first video. I just want to say that I love reading stories of any kind, fiction or non-fiction, and particularly I just feel like we should give more light to these nostalgic, vintage, and real ones from the past because they are timeless and genuine. We should be sharing them as those Reddit-like videos we have here on YouTube. So the vibes we have today feels like stumbling onto love letters you found in the attic, and we'll be reading them by the fireplace. Yeah, you have that ambience here, and I also put a bit of a gameplay for your attention span, just in case. But before we officially begin, I like to emphasize that the letters featured today are paraphrased and rewritten in a modern way, as if these were shared through a platform. And if you're interested to read them as it is in its entirety, because some are really long, I just picked one or a few entries, kindly check the description box for references and links. Okay? Also, I'll be inserting a bit of my unsolicited comments after every entry, if you don't mind. Just a few personal takeaways. If you have one, I'd love to read them in the comments. But above all, your presence and interest in watching this video is already very appreciated. You can play this in the background while you study or do games or sleep, if it suffices a sensation. Either way, get comfortable and let's begin. Your letter, my beloved, was received into my heart yesterday, and I could not manage to keep it sealed in my pocket all day as I had planned. I opened it instead while at work on the wharf, right in the middle of all the noise and bustle of the men around me. And reading it felt like looking up and seeing your face in a sunlit cloud above the harbor. If your wings would carry you that far, I would ask you to rest on such a cloud sometimes and let it bring you down to me. I confess I never look up at the sky anymore without thinking of you first. There have been strange broad-winged butterflies landing on the ship where I work lately, out here among brick warehouses and stacked stone, where nothing green or soft has any business being. I cannot explain their presence except to guess they are little pieces of your imagination sent out here to search for me on days you cannot calm yourself. It thrills me even now to write the word wife, and to read it again in your own handwriting thrills me more. I would not be parted from you for a single moment if it were left up to me, not for anything this world could offer instead. Every ordinary object around me on this wharf, the stones, the ships, the working men, seems dull and gray compared to a single page of your handwriting. I remain, as always and completely, your husband in every way but the ceremony itself. So this just touches something in my heart. A little personal to share, but I just had a breakup like days ago. It's actually almost a week. So this would just be my coping mechanism, reading love letters from the past. For a brief background, Nathaniel Hawthorne wrote these letters to Sophia Peabody during their 3.5-year courtship, much of it spent physically apart while he worked ordinary jobs to prepare for their future together. The original letters were actually later inherited by his children, who chose to publish them decades after his death, specifically because of how tender and unguarded they were at as we have read. But what gets me is that he wasn't a soldier separated by war, or a sailor separated by an ocean. He was, a working man on a dock, missing his fiancée on an average day, and somehow he turned that into some of the most beautiful writing in American literature, because it is filled with so much adoration and love. And there's something about the way he writes that makes you feel the actual weight of missing someone, and not just the idea of it. That kind of longing or affirmation is exactly what you need when you're apart from someone you love, right? I don't know how many people still sit down and write letters like these anymore. Personally, I love reading letters if they were given to me. But reading one from the past makes you really appreciate how much more intentional love used to sound in words. And particularly in this letter, how a person could turn a butterfly or a cloud into a small proof that you are being thought of even miles away. It's such a specific kind of magic of being able to feel close to someone without them physically being there, simply because they made you part of their ordinary day in their mind. It's just touching and lovely, so I hope all of us, men and women, get to experience being loved like this at some point, and that we're also able to give the same kind of love back, because it really should go both ways. And I don't know, I've already said a lot, but all in all, it's amazing to read letters like this because it reminds me of how deeply people are capable of loving each other when they actually try. Okay, for the second one, I already mailed today's letter to you, but I am so proud of the privilege of writing to the dearest girl in the world whenever I please, that I find myself adding a few more lines anyway, if only to say plainly that I love you. I love you the way dew loves flowers, the way birds love sunshine, the way waves love the breeze that stirs them, the way mother loves her firstborn child, the way old memory loves familiar faces. Take my kiss along with this letter and try to be reconciled to the plain fact that I belong to you completely now. I have read this letter back over just now, and I'll admit freely it is flippant and foolish and a little puppyish in places. I almost wish I had simply gone to bed instead of writing at all tonight. You once told me I must never tear up a letter after writing it to you, so despite how clownish and shabby it reads to me now, I am sending it exactly as written. I was in far too good a humor tonight for sensible letter writing, I think, and you will simply have to forgive me for that. Day after day, when we were together, we stayed together until 10 at night, and afterward I feel dreadfully sleepy and useless for anything else. Even so, not 1 minute of that time with you has ever felt wasted to me, not a single one. I remain yours forever and always, completely and without reservation. Alright, so Mark Twain wrote this during his courtship to Olivia Langdon, a refined, teetotaling young man who had already turned down his marriage proposal once before finally accepting his second. The marriage lasted for 34 years. Wow. And Livy went on to edit nearly everything he ever published, effectively shaping the voice of America's most famous writer from behind the scenes. What I love about this is that he catches himself mid-letter being embarrassed about how silly and unguarded he sounds, and instead of hiding it, he sends it anyway because she'd ask him to always be honest with her, even in his clumsiest moments. That feels like the real test of intimacy to me, and not the polished version of yourself you always try to show someone. I know, and it's okay, but sometimes the genuine side, or the natural side, even if it's not perfect, is the actual cream of the crop. Because you're brave enough to let them see the clownish, sleepy, over-the-top version that is only for you. And it's an exclusive kind of affection. And that's really sweet. Honestly, I kind of regret choosing these letters because it makes me a bit bitter. But anyway, what I also think about is applying this in our current generation because of how easy it is now to delete a text that feels too much, too soft, or too embarrassing before ever hitting send. However, Twain is essentially, telling us from over a century ago not to do that. There's something always funny and deeply touching about the fact that the man famous for his sharp wit and sarcasm was actually underneath all of it, writing lines about dew and flowers like a lovesick teenager. And it makes me think real love has never required us to be impressive, only honest, and that the silliest, least polished version of what we feel is usually the truest one worth keeping. So let this be a reminder to you if you ever felt not confident to show your personality, your uniqueness to others, but of course, still don't compromise your comfortability. Okay? Okay. For the next one, my dear, I wrote to you from near Council Bluffs, Iowa, where our company has arrived safely and in good time to join the others heading west across the plains. We crossed the Missouri River in the morning, and I wanted to get word to you before we press onward into country where letters may be harder to send. The provisions you packed and cooked for us before I left lasted the whole way here, except for part of the ham which a dog managed to steal from us one night on the road. Some months later, I am writing again, now from a place called Coloma in California, where the gold digging finally began in earnest. I think of you and the children constantly out here, more than the work itself most days. I wish in your next letter you would tell me exactly how the children were getting on at school, and whether little Thomas Benton has started talking yet, since he was still so small when I left. If you ever decided to make the journey out here yourself, I would ask you to bring garden seeds of every kind, especially onion seeds, since a single pound of onions sells for a full $1 in these parts. By my last letter, from Georgetown, 16 miles east of Sacramento, I'm still safe and still working alongside Hezekiah and Hoey, hoping that the digging pays off soon. I close, as always, hoping that kind Providence will preserve us both until the day we are together again, and I remain Faithfully, your affectionate husband. Okay, so Jacob Thrailkill wrote these letters to his wife Sarah across nearly 2 years apart, describing the plains crossing, the mining camps, and his constant homesickness for their children back in Iowa. I'm gonna say something very sad, and I'll hold your hand while I speak. According to family history, he succeeded in his mining venture and set out for home with his earnings in November of 1850, but he never made it back to Sarah. Sadly, he died somewhere on the return journey before reaching his family again. I'm so sorry to break your heart. Well, it broke mine too. But I still wanted to share because there's a particular kind of heartbreak that we can witness in reading a man ask so plainly about whether his baby has started talking yet, only to know he never got to hear it for himself. It makes me think about how much of love, especially like this, long-distance love, is really just an accumulation of small updates, a child's first words, a school report, an onion seed, because space deprived them of seeing a life they love, even if those happenings they're curious about are expected or not that grand. I mean, all of it is precious precisely because it's ordinary and we love the person, that's why we're curious and we want to be part of it, right? But I keep thinking about how he was so close. You know, an entire journey completed, the gold actually found, and still the ending wasn't his to have. And I really wonder what happened. It's really sad to know that you'll never get to grasp the very reason why you're making the sacrifice anyway in the first place. And it must have been really painful for the child too as he grew up, and for the wife. I can't imagine. And really, grief and loss is just something you would not know how to manage. So this makes me want to stop postponing the small updates I owe the people I love and who love me until some better time that isn't guaranteed to come. His letters weren't written so his wife wouldn't feel forgotten while he chased something for his family's futures and vice versa. So, yeah, you gotta send that message. For the fourth one, we have, my dear, I am writing to you from Little Deer Creek, about 2 miles outside Nevada City, where our camp has settled for now while the digging continues. It's a hard business trying to make a fortune out here, harder than most men back home understand, because for every man who returns with his earnings intact, there are several more who find only a grave in this ground instead. I have lost 5 acquaintances since first landing in San Francisco, men I knew and worked alongside, and I try my best each day not to let that discourage me from continuing. I see other men here making real fortunes almost daily, but I see at least 5 times as many working twice as hard just to keep themselves fed and alive. None of that changes how much I think of you back home in Massachusetts, further away from me now than I have ever been from anyone I love. The mail between us can take months to cross this country, so by the time you read this, so much will already have changed here. I cannot yet predict still, I keep writing anyway because a letter that arrives late is better to me than no letter reaching you at all. I picture you at home doing the small, ordinary things you always did, and somehow that picture keeps me steady more than anything else out here does. Whatever comes of these ventures, gold or non, I intend to come back to you exactly the man who left, if such a thing is so possible after all this. Oh, that's really sad. But, John Fletcher's letters home to Ruth describe a mining camp shadowed constantly by death, disease, and disappointment. Yet his tone towards his wife stays remarkably steady and hopeful throughout. Historians studying gold rush correspondence note that letters like his reveal how differently men wrote to their wives compared to how they wrote to business partners or brothers, because it's softer, slower, and far more emotionally exposed. And I seem to notice that back then, most jobs involved mining and digging, and seeing this kind of letter, you know, like a goodbye letter. I don't know how to describe it. It already tears my heart apart. It's basically my greatest fear of all time. Losing someone you love permanently. I really can't imagine how agonizing the waiting was. But still, I'd like to emphasize that the letter is mostly about studying himself by picturing her doing ordinary things at home, even if it's surrounded by actual death and financial ruin daily. And that tells me something about what real comfort looks like under pressure, and what kind of rest or peace you can achieve by just picturing someone you love doing something completely unremarkable, safe, and familiar. It's like an assurance that you still have a reason to survive and to come home. And you just realize that love is indeed powerful, isn't it? It becomes a drive, a motivation, a will to live and to continue fighting the odds. And I think about how often I reach for my phone during a hard day to see an ordinary, boring update from someone I love, which is a proof that their normal life is still quietly continuing somewhere. But back then, in the past, Fletcher and many people didn't have that option, so they had to build that same comfort entirely out of memory or imagination, waiting months for confirmation that he was right to feel steadied by it. So it makes me a lot more grateful for how instantly reachable the people I love actually are now, and a little more determined as well to actually use that access instead of letting it go unused out of habit. Likewise for this platform, so the reason why I started this channel, or I started making these videos. Okay, so next we have Augustus Caywood's letters to his wife Sarah Caywood back in 1853. My dear, I wrote to you now from Diamond Springs, having finally reached California after the long journey west that I described to you in my last letter. The trip itself tested me more than I expected, but knowing a letter from you might already be waiting for me at the post office here has kept my spirits from sinking too low along the way. Life in the mining camps is rougher than I let on before I left. The work is long, the company is mixed, and comfort is scarce most days. Still, I find myself managing better than I feared, mostly because I keep your last letter folded in my coat and read it again some evenings when the camp goes quiet. I think of Ludi constantly, of our house, of the particular sound of our own front door, small details I never once thought to appreciate properly, while I still had them every day. Please write back with anything at all from home, no matter how plain it might seem to you sitting there. I would rather read 3 pages about nothing in particular from you than the most exciting letter another man in this camp might receive from anyone else. The distance between us feels enormous most days, yet somehow a single letter from you manages to close nearly all of it in the moment I'm reading it. I remain out here working toward the day I can close that distance permanently and come home to you exactly where I belong. Oh, suddenly my screen is getting blurry. But Caywood's surviving letters to Sarah span only a matter of months in 1853, but they captured the same emotional pattern found across dozens of Gold Rush correspondences preserved at the Bancroft Library. It's full of homesickness measured in small requested details from an ordinary life back home. You realize that it's true, that you get to appreciate or miss the usual things you savor before when it's gone out of your senses now. And distance, it turns out, has never really been measured in miles, but in how long you go without hearing the small, unremarkable, completely ordinary details of someone else's day. And the detail that stays with me from this letter is him admitting he'd rather read 3 boring pages from her than an exciting letter from anyone else, because I think that's actually one of the clearest definitions of real love I've ever come across. You love, you're curious even about the little things. You want to see what they see and be a part of their day. It's about being comforted by the ordinary sound of their voice on a page, even when nothing interesting happened that week. And I think about how much pressure we put on ourselves now to only share the exciting, curated parts of our lives with people, don't we? And probably we think it isn't that important at all to be shared in the first place, so we tend to distance ourselves. But I realize that it's really not. It's always going to be important for someone who really loves you. And Caywood from this letter is telling us that the boring parts were the ones he actually needed the most. And probably that's a justification or proof that if someone loves you, they love you even with your boring parts, with your boring days. Ordinary moments and days will be cherished by a person who actually loves a person. And honestly, I enjoy listening and learning about someone's day, even if it's repetitive or it wasn't grand at all. There's just something in the image of him rereading one folded letter by the firelight that I really understand. It makes me want to actually save the ordinary texts or voice notes or letters I get I receive from people I love instead of letting them disappear into an endless scroll, or instead of, just also keeping it in my memory since I have a bad memory. So, like a junk journal or like a box of memories. That's a good idea, right? Okay, so we are down to our last letter. I was actually hoping that this entire video would last like an hour, but I didn't know it's gonna be that quick. So probably next time, if there are people who would actually watch my videos and who would really enjoy my videos, I might consider making longer videos, like 1 hour or 2 hours of reading letters from the past. Hopefully. So let's read the last one. My dear husband, I write to you today with news I have dreaded putting into words since it happened. Our daughter passed from us on the 21st, and I have sat with this letter unfinished for several days now, unable to find a way to tell you gently from so far away. I know you are working hard out there in Stockton for a family's future, and I do not wish to add to your burdens with grief you cannot act on from such a distance. Yet I could not bear to keep something so large from you either. The house feels different now in ways I find difficult to describe on paper. I keep the days moving forward as best as I can, managing what needs managing here, though certain hours of the day remain harder than others. I think of you constantly, wondering what the store looks like now, wondering if the drawings and cartons you sent me still make you laugh the way they once made me laugh reading them. Please write back when you're able, even if there is a little new to report from your end, since simply hearing from you steadies me more than you probably realize. I remain your loving wife, waiting for the day this distance between us finally closes for good, whatever that day may bring for us next. This is really sad. This is the Baxter correspondence preserved at the Kildare Learning Institute, and it includes ordinary business letters about their Stockton store, alongside deeply personal news like this, which is the correspondence that had to carry both the mundane and the devastating across the same slow, uncertain postal system from the past. And particularly what moves me most is that she had to decide completely alone when and how to deliver the hardest news of her life to someone who couldn't hold her hand while reading it, who might not even see the letter for weeks. That kind of solitary grief carried while still managing a household, still writing steady, carrying letters to a husband 3,000 miles away is a kind of strength I don't think gets nearly enough credit in how we remember this year. And because of how everything is inconvenient at that time, right? I think about how differently that moment would unfold today. It can be done through a single phone call, immediate comfort, someone's voice right there in the hardest instant. So it makes me want to stop taking that immediate access for granted the way I sometimes do. I know it's still going to be difficult. It's still going to be hard to process grief, but I just really can't imagine how it was back then. And you know that when you read the letter, it's already been days or probably months. It already happened and you just learned it by now. So reading this letter, I felt an unexpected pull to actually call the people I love more often. Not just when there's news to share, but simply because I can. And back then she couldn't. And clearly he would have given anything too. So you see, distance has never made love smaller. It's only ever made people work harder to prove it was still there. And I think that's worth remembering the next time reaching someone I love or reaching someone you love takes nothing more than a single tap on a screen. And it's not like we're invalidating or we're trying to compare, but you know, these are just some lessons and realizations I had upon reading these letters, especially that today everything is so easy to access with the technology and with the devices that we have. So, that's everything for now. 6 different distances: a dock in Boston, a lecture tour, a wagon trail west, a mining camp shadowed by loss, and a slow, uncertain postal route across an entire unfinished country. And yet, every single one of them was really about the same exact thing: missing someone and refusing to let silence stand in for love. Personally, I've never been fond of long-distance relationships. I am the clingy, needy type who wants someone close, even with everything technology let us do now. So it's hard for me to imagine what it must have been like for these 6 people, waiting weeks or months just for a single page and still choosing to stay faithful and loving the whole time. It's genuinely humbling to read letters like these and be reminded that real love has always been able to survive distance and time, long before either of us had a phone to make it easier. And if one of these letters reminded you of someone you've been meaning to call or write, or simply tell something ordinary to, I hope you'll go do that before the day ends. And I'm gonna do it in my end. So I don't know, again, if someone will watch this video, but if you do, and if you perhaps stayed until this part, thank you so much for spending this time with me and with these people tonight, and I hope I'll see you in the next one.